there is a resentment that is growing.
New to the city? Working remotely? You're an effing plague and the locals effing hate you. Leave.
Do I actually need to leave Mexico?
Hi, I'm Anne, single mom to Alex. I consider myself to be a retiree, traveling through Mexico for the foreseeable future, and certain words like remote worker, digital nomad, expat, immigrant, these are words that relate to me. And so seeing that sign really triggered a lot of emotions in me. So yeah, is this poster talking about me?
Okay, so Mexicans are suffering. And I know this for a few reasons. One is because everyone is suffering, like the world is kind of suffering right now. Inflation is everywhere. For those of you curious, Mexico has definitely felt the inflation, I would say on a lot of products, like we're talking everyday items, fruits and meats. Things are 20 to 30% more today than it was 8 months ago. A small rotisserie chicken used to cost me about 90 pesos. Now it's about 115. Imported items, of course, have gone up. Philadelphia used to be about 25 pesos. Now it's about 33. Half a kilo of freshly made tortillas used to be around 8 pesos, and now it's 10. So life has gotten more, a lot more.
Mexico is currently experiencing the highest rate of inflation in 20 years.
Se ha incrementado el costo de los productos.
Lo doble.
¿En serio?
En serio.
And this year, Mexico also had a drought over the summer. Thank goodness it's rainy season again. So everyone, I think, has water now. But also we recently had a gas shortage, like LP gas, like cooking gas, which I think has been resolved, at least for now. But I'm confident that the wages of people have not increased. Certainly not by 20 or 30% to keep up with this. And this cost of living flux has actually been significant enough to where I've actually started some side gigs. I've started transcribing on Rev again because I need extra cash just to keep up my lifestyle that I had in Mexico just a few years ago. And so if I'm feeling it, trust me, the locals are feeling it. It's not even a question, I don't think. And because the locals are feeling it, and they don't necessarily, like, there are a lot of digital nomad and online opportunities that are not available to people from other countries, which is something I never really thought about until quite recently. With the increase in inflation, with these price hikes, not only are people kind of suffering in terms of financially, but there is a resentment that is growing. It's not as dramatic as maybe people assume, but there is a growing resentment towards digital nomads.
And digital nomads, sometimes called remote workers, are essentially people who travel the world working online. And while that's great, they also have a tendency to promote their lifestyle, which is totally expected. But in that process, they're going around exclaiming how everything is so cheap and inexpensive in these different countries, to include Mexico, while the locals in those countries are really feeling the inflation and the lifestyle differences between these traveling remote workers.
And so signs like this have started popping up here in San Cris. It started popping up probably about 3 to 4 weeks ago.
Some Chilangos, as locals are known, are fed up. Recently, expletive-laced posters appeared around town. New to the city? Working remotely? They read in English, "You're an effing plague and the locals effing hate you. Leave."
Some locations have taken these signs down once they realize what these signs mean, and other locations have left them up. So not too many of these around, but just enough for you to kind of understand that these sentiments are a reflection of at least a portion of the local population, and it's something we need to kind of consider. Like, how does that affect me? And so one of my first instincts was to ponder leaving. Yeah, literally to do what this sign told me to do. This is actually a question I get asked kind of frequently, which is, how do you stop gentrification? How are you able to travel to new locations and not affect the local economy? And the answer is you can't. Like, it legitimately is a situation where if more than one person goes to a place, we're going to have an effect on people because people have an effect on people. So if it's very important to you not to gentrify a location, not to affect the location, you don't move. you stay where you are. Now, of course, there are ways to slow it down, to mitigate, to ease the change, but at the end of the day, the 100% way is to never move there. Now, in my opinion, this will hurt a city as much as it will help a city. Big picture, change is usually a good thing. However, if the intention is to leave a culture alone, leave a location alone, that's how you do it. You leave them alone and you don't interfere. It's also why, if you've noticed, people like tell you they live in Mexico, but they refuse to tell you the city they live in because they don't want all these expats coming in. They want to keep the prices low. They want to keep things the same. Yeah, that's, on the one hand, it's an attempt to not gentrify a location, but it's also a way to not help a city change. So what's an example? The internet in San Cris, while sometimes super frustrating, by the way, has been improving. This helps, of course, the digital nomads who are coming here who need that good internet. But if you think that good internet access is not also helping the locals have opportunities for online resources, then you're being equally naive, right? Again, having internet also costs money. And so at the end of the day, any benefit to infrastructure that expats or an influx of immigrants bring will also bring a higher cost of living. Like, that's kind of the way it works. My first instinct when I saw this was that it was against all American expats, all American immigrants. That was my first impression. The fact that it was in English, and the US is not the only English-speaking community, but yeah, those were my first thoughts. All right, so when you first saw this sign, how did it make you feel, or what did you think?
Well, the way it says that locals don't like you, it's well, locals hate you, it says. It doesn't say we hate you, it says locals hate you. So I feel like that kind of implies that it wasn't written by locals. Don't know, like, maybe they were, but.
Now, looking this closely at the language and the tone of this really never occurred to me. So I've actually had several people suggest the same thing that Alex is, that the author or the creator of these posters is probably not actually a Mexican, and in fact, there's a lot of cultural differences between the tone of this poster versus the tone of a lot of the graffiti that we see around town. Nevertheless, I'm confident that at least some locals do feel this way.
Now, I ultimately decided that I would be overreacting to just run away. And so instead I posted these pictures onto my community page, and of course, I'm reading what's happening on the Facebook pages also. And one particular commenter who comments in Spanish, I believe he is a local here in Mexico, said these words. And so in Google Translate, his sentiment translates to, not all of us think like that, but if there is a big wave of people who come to Mexico to stay longer and don't use the tourist services, those are the ones these posters refer to. Not all of us think that way. So one, I love how the locals almost always start their conversation on these topics by saying it's not everyone, it's not a reflection of all of us, don't lump us all together. And so I always appreciate, he started and stopped his comment with these words, but in the middle was letting me know who he thought at least these posters were actually talking about. Foreigners who do not frequent the tourist activities. And it took me by surprise because that's definitely how I describe myself. Do I actually need to leave Mexico? Okay, I wanted to stop and say really quickly that when Daniel responded, I did not take his comment as a sign that he thought I should personally leave or that he thought it was directed towards me in particular. Just, I want to be very clear on that. I don't think any of my commenters honestly have ever been mean-spirited in their response to me, ever. And certainly I'm always optimistic enough never to take it that way. So one, never did I feel that any particular commenter told me to leave. However, when he used the term tourist, right? Somebody who does not do touristy things, that's what I consider myself to be. That's what shocked me. Not that I thought he wanted me to leave or that he thought I was not doing touristy things. It's just a self-definition. And speaking of self-definition, it is a huge thing where words, right? Whether it's expat, foreigner, immigrant, tourist, digital nomad, retiree, whatever terms we tend to call ourselves, they're just boxes. They're just kind of blanket conceptual definitions that might accurately reflect how we define ourselves or how we think of ourselves. But at the end of the day, none of us are a stereotype. None of us are 100% a stereotypical digital nomad. None of us are 100% what somebody would consider an immigrant to be or an expat. Like, these are all concepts, right? I consider myself a retiree, for example. However, I don't match the stereotype of a 60-year-old who is no longer living with their children, because their children are usually grown up by the time they retire, right? So I'm a blend a little bit. So just wanted to make that clear. And so here's what I've kind of concluded. When people tell you to stop living your dream, when people tell you to go away, to go home, to shut up, you have three options. You can in fact choose to go home, to not live in Mexico or not pursue overseas living. That's a valid and potential option that you might go for. Or you can choose to completely ignore the haters, right? Like, just do you, do what makes you happy, pursue travel if that's what you want to pursue, and just live your best life. Option number 2, right? Or 3, you could also just recognize that the people saying these words are hurting. The economy sucks. Finances are very difficult, right? Inflation is happening right now. The world is costing more and more, and travel right now is still pretty restricted. Like, at the end of the day, the barrier to entry is high. And so people who are hurting, people who are suffering, people who don't know how to improve their lives have to find an outlet of some sort. And sometimes it's an artistic outlet, like putting up posters. And so with that realization, option number 3 is to be more considerate, to be more compassionate, to ponder what actions am I doing that are maybe hurting others? And is that action important to me? Because if it's not important, why am I doing it, right? So being a little more considerate, being a little more kind, I think that's the route I'm going to go. So I'm staying in Mexico for sure. I'm just gonna make a more conscious choice to get to know the locals that much more. So this includes not only improving my Spanish, but just taking time, having more coffee dates with the people I can communicate easily with, and get to know them at a better level. One super interesting I have noticed, however, in all these price increases is a lot of restaurants and a lot of service providers have actually not increased their prices. They've just taken the loss themselves in the hopes, I believe, that inflation will eventually come back down, which is honestly so amazing and a great reason to support local small businesses.
Responsible tourism side here. I mean, if we do purchase traditional, original from the people around, you will then see that it's a real textile with a real symmetry of around, and then the money goes really to a family that still respects these symmetries, that still gives respect to these older gods they had, to these older beliefs they had, right?
I think the culture is always to help.
Well, for me, it happened to me the same as your son.
I wanted to also really quickly just thank you guys again for all your amazing support, my subscribers, the amazing comments you guys leave. I honestly love them all. As well as, of course, those people who are so generous, and a special thanks to all those who have bought us a coffee, or in Alex's case, a chocolate, those who have provided super chats, and of course, those who have joined my YouTube membership. Thank you guys so much. JP, Renee, Andrea, Alexandra, and Alicia. You guys are epic. I love all of you, all of my supporters, the people who like, the people who share. You guys are the bomb. Thank you.